Hi, my name's Melinda Kingsley, and this is my presentation on the research that I conducted around suicide, uh, which is it's a difficult subject, but it's something that is increasingly a problem, and conversation around it is important. So, suicide, I'm calling it an epidemic of silence because um, I believe that, and what I hypothesized was that the blackout, the kind of handshake agreement to black out a lot of information regarding suicide between organizations like the World Health Organization and the APA is, we can't eliminate that it is also doing harm. Um, so some of the statistics that I wanted to hit were suicide is the 10th leading cause of death. The suicide rate has increased up 30% over the past 2 decades. And what you need to have, the information you need to appreciate that number, is that that doesn't mean simply that there have been more suicides. You would expect more suicides as the population increased. This talks about per 100,000 people, the rate of suicide. So this number is used to adjust for population. Something that affects, I feel like, college students in particular. Now, I'm a non-traditional college student, but the majority of people, individuals attending Dalton State College, fall in the age groups, this major age group here, 10 to 34. And for that age group, suicide is the second leading cause of death, which was shocking to me. Um, there are there are twice as many suicides than homicides every year. This was also a statistic that I was surprised by when I learned about it years ago, because it's uh, my contention is that you wouldn't necessarily get that information from you know watching or reading the news. The news tends to sensationalize homicide, and what I'm trying to get at in as part of this research is that sets up a false perception by overemphasizing one thing and then really not talking about the other. Uh, this number is sad and astounding. Is that for every completed suicide attempt, they estimate that there are 20 other attempts in the population, and that if you kind of do the math on that, they're saying that in 2020 there were 950,000 people who attempted to kill themselves. And to me, that is an epidemic. That's a huge number. So some more ideas, and I've covered some of these here, but what they can tell from research, the research is contradictory first, even though a lot of the studies that you run into uh, treat it as generally accepted knowledge. There are definitely conflicting studies, and studies that find something completely different. One of the major studies, it's a meta-analysis of all the studies that have been done, and it was really the first one of its kind in 2018. It suggests, actually, it doesn't suggest. Let me say this. They admit in this study to including study results that they themselves identified as having a moderate risk for bias. And I don't know that those kind of things should ever be included in science when you're talking about, when you're trying to prove or disprove, uh, because they skew the results. So, like I said, there is research that out there that is saying, hey, we don't know that. We need to learn some more things about it. All right, so the other problem with some of these studies that are floating around is that, for example, in the meta-analysis, there was no uh, study included in that data that went longer than 2 months. So it can't exclude. There's a lot of things that can't exclude, but most pertinently, I think it can't exclude that these aren't magnet events where people who were already disturbed or in a mental health crisis that or underlying mental health issues really is probably the most comprehensive way to say it. There's no way to say that they weren't already suicidal and would have eventually attempted suicide anyway. The way that I interpret, and some others have interpreted, that this kind of conflict and disagreement, shows up and manifests itself is that instead of interpreting that as let's throw out any discussion or reporting or public discourse about suicide and let's just avoid it altogether. And I think that also has repercussions as far as people feeling isolated that have these feelings. People definitely, afraid to share these things with others because it's not talked about. It's sort of voodoo, sorry, taboo subject. So let me see here if we got all of that. So in my primary research, I'm kind of cutting to the survey. The purpose of this survey, what I wanted to address in this survey, was to look at what information people had, where they were getting their information from, and was the accuracy of that information and the necessity for it. So when I asked if the 14 participants, if they'd ever considered suicide, 6 indicated that they had. 2 did not wish to disclose that information, which doesn't prove anything either way, but certainly it speaks to this is an important issue. So when asked if there were more suicides or homicides, 28%, 28.5% of the participants guessed wrong. They thought wrong. And, 28.5%, that's over a quarter. And if you applied that to a larger population, that's a shocking number. When asked if anyone had ever reached out to them to talk about them having suicidal thoughts, looking for support, half, 50% of the people that in this survey said yes, they had. 35.7% of those surveyed had no specific information as to how to get help, how to help themselves, which is difficult looking at some of the other statistics we found in this survey. When asked if they knew someone who had attempted suicide, 64.3% said yes, they did. So that leads us to kind of this chart because it's much more concise and clear to share this visual with it. Looking at where people are getting their information from, it's the internet is the top answer here. Second is social media. and the third are from friends. So we're looking at these top answers here, and I think everyone can kind of agree that social media doesn't have a pedigree in as far as the quality and the accuracy of that information. Its users contribute to that content. Um, the internet is an understandable one because people can, in private, explore options about it, or uh, as far as resources. And it's such, as I said, a taboo subject. No one wants to know, uh, wants someone else to know. So this is happening because people want to do it in private. Uh, and then social media is involved, and then it's friends that other people are talking to about it, which we showed that and being upheld in the survey. This one's a really hard one for me, is that, 21% said that no one's ever talked to them about suicide um, at all. All right, so my interview with Dr. Damon Downs. Dr. Downs has over 20 years of experience dealing with people who have attempted suicide or have suicidal thoughts. And in this interview with Dr. Damon Downs, she talked about that mental health issues are the biggest contributing factor to suicide. And that makes sense to me. But she goes a step further and says that though being exposed or consuming media about suicide, it can trigger, certain thought patterns in people. But the issue's not really the media. It's that you have, it's a mental health issue. And so you're dealing with people that are either diagnosed or undiagnosed, um, uh, dealing with things like depression and bipolar disorder, and sometimes, thought distortions. So, uh, really, what she comes out and says here is that well-adjusted people do not attempt suicide. Now, there's no such thing as always and never, but as a general principle, that's what that was her feeling about it. I hope that this video has been informative and that maybe it gave you some information. There is a suicide hotline if you or someone that you know is having suicidal thoughts, and I would recommend that as a great place to start. Thank you.